Anyway, well, so let's get started. We're probably going to have some more people join. We usually have people join over the course of the first 10 minutes or so, but on the Bridge Club, we always promise we'll try to keep our conversation to 25 minutes or so, knowing how important everybody's evening is. So we're going to get started. I do want to take a couple seconds. I'm Brenda Andreessen. I'm one of the founders of the Bridge Club. This is Catherine Haskins, my partner in the Bridge Club. And we started the Bridge Club, just a real quick background because some of you are new. We started the Bridge Club about 18 months ago, and our whole idea was to help veterinary professionals connect with each other, engage with each other, learn from each other, and then grow and help us to grow the profession collectively too. So we'd have people, whether you're a CEO of a company or a brand new veterinary technician, we thought we could all learn something from each other. So that's what the Bridge Club is really all about. We do like to see faces. So I know some of you might be eating or grabbing a drink, whatever it is you're doing, but if you could turn on your camera, it really will enhance, I think, what you're going to get out of this conversation and enhance our engagement as a community too. So we really encourage you to do that. Don't we, Kathy?
And unmute yourself, because this is a free conversation, meaning that you can jump in at any point in time. The only thing is, if you do have background noise, we may test some muting to figure out where the background noise is so it doesn't bother. But other than that, unmute yourself. We're a mute-free zone.
Now, we encourage you to throughout the conversation. So in just a minute, we're going to introduce our host for this fabulous conversation, but we really do encourage engagement throughout the conversation. So if you have a question, either raise your hand or put it in the chat. I'm sure Jess is going to give a couple of opportunities to ask questions. And then we always do our after party at the end, where it's kind of a free-for-all and everybody just jumps in and talks. So if there's not an appropriate time to ask your question, hang on for the after party and jump in there. So, yeah, okay. So it's 7:04. So without further ado, the Bridge Club is always intrigued by solutions to old problems. And obviously associate pay and keeping your employees happy is a problem that probably never will go away. But we really believe that there are some things you can do, think about, try, that will help increase that employee engagement and encourage them to become more motivated employees. So our guest host tonight is a really, and Jessica, I know you're going to be probably like, oh, pshaw, Brenda, but truly a phenomenal innovator, a really great collaborator, and someone that I think has learned a lot in your career and lots to teach us over what she's learned too. So I would like to introduce Dr. Jessica Trimble. Jess, raise your hand. People can see where you are there. Yes. And Jess leads the medical team at Fuzzy Pet Health. And so, Jess, why don't you just say a few words about yourself and then kick us off with our toast?
Sure. First off, thank you for having me. I have known you lovely ladies for a couple of years now, and I've always admired what you've done in just trying to get people together to have these conversations about hard topics, because obviously we can't just sit on them as a profession. We have to put our heads together and figure out what we can do to improve ourselves and the world that we live in. So it's a big part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I am the Chief Veterinary Officer of Fuzzy Pet Health. It's a San Francisco startup that's focusing on mobile healthcare and telemedicine with a mission to increase access to basic healthcare to pets everywhere. And so we do a lot of things that are not normal in the veterinary profession, you know, alternative business models, telemedicine for one, definitely pushing some regulatory borders here and there. And so I graduated from veterinary school back in 2013, and I thought I was going to be a cattle vet. I spent most of my fourth year doing dairy consulting, and through that really learned to love healthcare systems and learning how to, if we can take care of the people and the systems properly, then everybody will end up with a better life sort of in the back end, from people and animals included. And so I've definitely taken what I would consider a non-traditional route in my career, but I've loved every minute of it, and I'm super glad that I've gone down that route. So please feel free to interrupt me at any time. I won't be offended. Otherwise, I will try to stop a few times to allow people to ask questions if they do have them. Shall we start with the toast?
Yes.
Right in. Yes, whenever you are ready, toast away.
That's it's probably the most important part of the entire.
Exactly.
Oh, I don't have a drink. I'll toast with my Composure Pro.
Okay. That works great.
toast, so hold on to that glass for a minute. But essentially, I interview probably 5 to 7 veterinarians a week. Some that I'm considering hiring, some that I'm considering partnering with, some who are just interested in our business model. And I always ask them why they're interested in us and why they're considering leaving their current practice. And I ask because I care really deeply about my own team's happiness and engagement and culture. And I want to be really sure that I'm learning from everybody else's mistakes and hard work, because at a startup, I don't have time to repeat the past. We have enough problems to solve, and people problems shouldn't have to be one of those issues. So over the last 3.5 years, I have interviewed hundreds of veterinarians, and the answers to the questions that I'm asking are similar, like every single year, and it's the same across all age groups, all parts of the country, and 99% of the time, the answer to the questions about what people care about is actually not money. It plays a part, but it's not the central factor. And so right now at Fuzzy, we have just under 60 part of our medical team. A lot of these people never see each other, but we have this strong, supportive, sort of rock star culture. And without that, our companies will go nowhere. So I will say, let's toast to having a team that's engaged in veterinary practice with a positive culture of innovation and improvement, and just a profession that is happy and healthy as a whole.
Cheers.
Need my Bridge Club glass, I'm sad.
Yay!
All right. So how many of you, and please shout out or raise your hands, have ever fired somebody for not meeting your standards for company culture? A couple, okay. Not everybody. Secondarily, how many of you have actually sat down with your whole team, from the kennel person who scoops the poop all the way to the medical director, and actually talked about what values they care about in their workplace? Fewer people. Okay. So, and that's generally what I've seen, is that we're willing to say, don't fit our culture, you know, you're out of here. But when we're creating our own culture and setting our values, we as a team don't always get alignment on what those values really should be. And so how can we expect buy-in from our employees to our company culture if we're not actually allowing the people living the culture to have a say in what the values are in our companies? So at Fuzzy, our company values have been created by and voted on by the employees. So vision statements, that's not value. Mission statements are not values, but you know, the values themselves are going to be around how you operate and how you communicate and really what you care about as a company. So quarterly at Fuzzy, we shut down for a day. No appointments go out. We shut off the telemedicine and we go on an offsite. And we go through those values and make sure that every 3 to 4 months we are reiterating what those values are. We are ensuring that everyone is in alignment with those values. We mix and match people in teams to make sure that everyone can sort of talk about how they live those values in their day-to-day lives at work. And sometimes we discover that a value we had 6 months ago no longer matters to us because we have grown or changed as a company in some way. But that just makes it all the more valuable because then, again, as a team, we can sort of restate what is important to us in that time and how we want to work together as a team from there for the future. So culture changes as priorities change and team sizes change. But culture can't be ignored and it can't be left unnurtured. And there's a lot that goes into culture, but pay is where we're going to start because you can't have a good company culture if people aren't fundamentally happy and feel valued. And value often for people can come with how they're being paid. So let's start with that. But I will say over and over that pay is not the most important part of culture, and it is not the most important thing to our associates. It's just the first thing that I'm going to talk about. So There's a lot of pretty standard ways to pay right now. So right now, I mean, you guys can shout them out too, but salary, salary plus commission, commission only, salary plus bonuses. We've got per diem, we've got per hour, there's bidding systems out there. So there's all kinds of different pay types, and there is 100% not a right way to pay. It's going to be dependent on the human being that is getting paid, and it's going to be dependent on the practice and how they want to build their culture, because how you pay will affect your culture. So for instance, salary plus commission can be a total culture drain if it's not managed properly. Commission only is going to just deflate your new graduates because they don't know how to make money yet. Things like salary plus bonuses, especially if it's profit sharing over a team, can actually be really beneficial to playing together nicely as a team. Paying in a per day rate can be great for some practices, but for those practices where you never know if you're going to get out on time or 3 hours late, paying by the day, people are going to leave you no time because they don't feel like they're getting paid for that extra time. And so again, no specific way that you should be paying. Just know that it's a question you need to ask your team members and yourself about how do you want to incentivize the people that you're working with. So I'll share a couple of experiences for myself, because at this point, my expertise in pay is simply because I have been paid just about every way a veterinarian can be paid, and I've experienced the positives and negatives that go along with that, as well as having these conversations with veterinarians. And I always ask them how they're paid, how they prefer to be paid, and the different methods that they've had. So the very first job that I had was paid on a per diem basis, and this was right out of veterinary school. But this meant I was not paid for extra hours I worked. I wasn't paid for the weekends that I went in to take care of hospitalized patients. But I left that company not because of the pay, but actually because of the team and the culture. The practice manager never should have been allowed to run that practice. She was a total power trip, and we couldn't institute any positive changes. And so while I didn't like how I was paid in that practice, it didn't really affect why I left, because there were other bigger factors to play there. The second job that I had was a salary plus commission job. And I actually really liked the hours of that job. My pay was very fair. But I left that job because I didn't feel like I had a voice in being able to make positive change in that company. So for instance, there was a sign that hung in the window, and it had this giant dog on it that was like looking into the practice. And every time I would put a cat on the exam table, the cats would just look at that dog and would be terrified because that dog was staring at them. And so I asked, can I turn that sign around? And it took 6 months for the powers to be in that practice to approve and turn the sign around so that the cats wouldn't be terrified. And for me, that was it. If I can't make such a simple change as to turn a sign around, it's probably not the right place for me. My third job, I was paid hourly. I loved being paid hourly. It was great for me. I got paid for the time that I worked. If I put in extra hours, I was covered for that. I was motivated to put in extra hours. Hourly salary or hourly payment for me was really fantastic. But I have heard from other practice owners that it can incentivize laziness in people who aren't necessarily the most motivated. So again, pros and cons to that. And my current job is all salary. It is okay. Honestly, I'd prefer to go back to hourly because I'm putting in way more hours than what I'm technically being paid for. But it's okay because we have such great benefits in our culture otherwise that I'm fine with it because again, the pay is not the most important part. So moral of the story here is when you are thinking about pay structures, you need to think about how you are incentivizing your team, because commission-based payment can put too much focus on individual success, which can really cause a lot of stress between your staff. So, I've heard stories of doctors who would get in early so they could rearrange the schedule so that they could get the more high dollar appointments, or technicians that would do the same thing for doctors, where they would switch things around or put different people's initials. And so if you have potentially less than trustworthy team members, or some that are very money driven, I don't think commission-based pay is a great way to do that. And I will say too that I have seen a lot of posts up in some of these veterinary forums of people that are trying to leave some practices where they were getting like a salary plus commission, where written in the fine print was a bit about negative accrual. This blows my mind. There are veterinarians that are trying to leave practice with the culture, and they are turning out owing that practice money in order to leave because they say they didn't make enough commission for that practice, which I think is completely crazy. But again, it's how are we incentivizing our people? So there's no right answer here. I personally really like hourly or salary plus a profit sharing base. And profit sharing, I believe, should be based more on like the number of people that you've seen, or the number of referrals that you get, or the number of positive reviews that you receive, or something that is not necessarily how much money is that particular person bringing in. I definitely saw a drain on our technician culture from one of my jobs because they knew that I was making more money when they were the people that were setting me up to make that money. So for instance, I would make extra commission if we sold a lot of heartworm, flea, and tick prevention. But you better believe that that technician was the one who was doing all of the education about that preventative before I even got in the room. But, they felt some bitterness that, they were the ones doing a lot of the work, and yet I got the reward for that. So again, no right answer, but we just need to consider how incentivizing on a monetary basis can really cause those negative effects on our culture. And so when you're considering how you can incentivize your team to work harder, work longer, do better, ask them, what do they value? Maybe they value more vacation time. Maybe they value a team offsite. Maybe they value getting a great bottle of tequila at Christmas. Like, there's a lot of different ways that we can incentivize our team members, and money is not always the right answer. So before we move on to other culture issues, does anyone have quick questions about pay structures?
Though I can tell Kimberly was very much against the negative accrual.
Exactly.
She was not happy about that at all, nor would I be. And you said there's no right or wrong answer. I feel like that's a wrong answer.
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah. I feel like there are a lot of wrong answers. I would love to know, Jess, if you have any comments about what has worked for you guys at Fuzzy. You're a super innovative new company. You're doing cool things. Do you have any advice? I'm also part of a startup. Have not opened our first hospital yet, trying to figure out what is the best way to pay doctors. Do you have anything to share regarding what you guys have done that's been super successful or not?
Oh, we just lost. Oh, there you go. We lost your sound.
I killed Jessica.
I know. Hold on, Jess. Hold on. Okay. Speak up again, Jess.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Yay. Okay. So right now we pay our doctors on an hourly basis because we wanted to ensure that they're getting paid for every moment they're traveling to house calls and, writing medical records for us. We chose not to do a commission-based pay for them because we are a membership service, and so included in our membership are a lot of the things that those doctors would have been making commission on, like at a different practice. And so they can't make commission on some blood panels or on preventative medications. And so for them, they were happy to just get paid an hourly wage that was worth it to them. And so, we're paying a fair hourly wage rather than paying less and then adding commission on. And that's worked really well for us. We've had 0 complaints.
I think that actually leads right in, Jessica, some of the things you've been saying is it's not just about the pay, and you've got a scenario where you work compared to a more traditional practice, perhaps. So this is like the perfect segue point, I guess, to talking a little bit about the culture and that kind of motivation too, because culture is something that exists everywhere, no matter what your business model is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of my favorite questions to ask when I'm interviewing new vets is, what do you want? You're leaving a practice, or you're considering leaving your practice and coming to us. So what is it that you're looking for in your new adventure, and let's see how we can accommodate that. Flexible schedules is almost always the very first thing that they tell me. I want to be able to leave a little early on a Tuesday to go to my kid's ball game, or maybe work 4 days this week so I can take a free weekend, but I'll work 6 days next, right? We are human beings with lives and kids and families and medical conditions, and expecting people to work the same hours all the time, the same days, it's just not really feasible. It works well for some, but if we can provide those flexible schedules, you will retain your employees, I think, so much longer. It's one of the very first things that people ask me for. So we try very hard to be flexible, and we will allow our doctors to bump their schedules along as they are giving us the hours that we are paying for. We can find ways to move those around on days or times or shift things here and there. And sure, it takes, poor Patty who does our scheduling, it takes her a little bit longer to do the schedules. But if that means that she's not having to spend 6 hours to train a new employee, it's worth it. So flexible schedules, number one thing that people ask for. A lot of people have been talking about going into relief because they want to be able to bail on toxic environments. And so it sort of comes back to that culture issue of, if you have, technicians or other veterinarians, negative people then on power trips, get them out of there, fire them. That's the number one reason that you are going to lose a really great employee, because good people aren't going to hang around your negative Nancy's. They're going to get out of there. So people who are doing relief are doing it because if they work at a hospital that is full of negativity, they don't ever have to work there again, and they can go somewhere else. And I can respect that completely. So management needs to be able to work on culture such that if there are negative people or people on power trips or people who are unwilling to improve their systems or become more efficient or try something new, you have to find a different place for that person to work, help them get a job elsewhere. But you will lose great employees if you continue to keep the bad employees. Vacation time was another huge one. 2 weeks of vacation doesn't cut it. Not at all. 3 to 4 weeks vacation. Actually, at Fuzzy, we offer unlimited paid time off for our full-time employees. And a lot of people say, how does that work? People have to abuse that. But because we say, if you need a mental health day, you take it. If you want to go on a vacation, you let us know and you take it. And we've actually found that we have to almost force people to take vacations. Because they have the option to take as much vacation as they want, they don't feel the need to abuse that system. And so we've had 0 problems with unlimited paid vacation time for our employees. This is all, though, standard on you have to still pay people what they're worth. So all of these other things are nothing if you're not paying people what they're worth. So avoiding monotony was another thing, and I believe that we as veterinary practices are going to be able to do better and better with avoiding monotony as we bring in more digital services like telemedicine, for instance. Allow your veterinarian to have a surgery day and an appointment day, and hey, maybe you can work from home on Thursday and do all your surgical rechecks at home on your couch in your pajama bottom, and talk to people through the computer instead. So as we have more digital innovation, I think we'll be able to get rid of the monotony of poking dogs all day long, and that will help a lot. And then long days, no breaks. Veterinarians have bladders and stomachs, and I think a lot of practices forget about that. People have to pee and they have to eat. And if you don't allow people time to do that, they're gone. My very first practice would schedule me for appointments from 8 a.m. to noon, and then a lunch from noon to 2, and then appointments again from 2 to 6. But hey, guess what? I was actually from noon to 2 supposed to do all of the drop-offs and surgeries that came in on a walk-in basis, which meant that I had technicians feeding me. Oh yeah, they need to drink too. That's correct. Somebody put that in chat. You are right, they need to drink too. So don't forget that everybody needs a chance to decompress during their day. And I've had a lot of people tell me that they left their past clinic because they didn't feel that their clinic cared about them as a human being, because they didn't get 10 minutes even to eat lunch with just some peace and quiet and silence. And then probably the last big thing that people have told me why they're leaving is because upper management did not support them. And a lot of this has to do with clients and emotional blackmail from clients, where, they had a terrible situation where that client is, throwing a fit about some bill or a decision the doctor made. And rather than backing up their doctor, the upper management apologized, told them that the doctor was wrong, comped their bill, and let that person stay client. Verbally abusive and emotionally blackmailing clients have no place in our profession. None. And that's something that I've tried very hard at Fuzzy to make very obvious, that if this person is being verbally abusive in any way, like, they're gone. We don't need that in our culture. And our veterinarians are always so grateful when they see it, back them up. And make sure that they feel that support from us and that we trust them. They're doing good medicine and they're doing the right thing.
So I have a question, Jessica, right now before you move on a little bit, because we are at the 7:28 mark, but so if anybody does have to depart, we always promise, but this is a pretty interesting conversation. I think we're all getting some good tidbits from it. So we encourage everybody who can to hang on with us a little bit more. But the question that like, I keep popping into my mind as you're talking about what you see with the people that you interview most consistently, do you see much of a difference from one generation to the next or one gender to the next? Or is it just fairly universal, the kinds of things people say that are important to them?
So the things that I've stated so far have been fairly universal. I will say that the older doctors that I have interviewed, and we're talking probably 50 and above, seem to care more about the money than those 50 and below. And so that's obviously totally anecdotal and I have no data to support that. But if, for the number of people that have asked me, what does this job pay? It's almost always the older generation, whereas it's the more millennials that are saying, what is the culture like? How are you going to support me? What is my schedule going to be like? So certainly there is a difference there. One thing that I'm noticing with the very new grads that are coming out is that they are caring more about that support from upper management. They want the higher ups in their clinic to have their back, and also making sure that the people in their clinic are open to change. And so these are people who are coming and saying like, hey, I tried to introduce this new protocol that I thought would really increase our efficiency in running this diagnostic, and I got shut down because nobody wanted to change. And so that is something that I think I've heard this year more than the last couple of years, was that they're leaving hospitals because the hospital is resistant to innovation or positive change.
So I have a question, because I do think all these are really, really critical. And I'm curious from the group in general, because is the fear of potentially not having that body in the hospital superseding, meaning the veterinarian in the hospital superseding the willingness to make sure the culture is nourishing and that we're taking care of our people? Because it is a candidate market. So I'm wondering, for the perspective of, is that hindering and forcing more people into relief vet and all that kind of stuff? We've got Cindy on the group tonight. I'm just curious about that. Is there a huge fear of that there wouldn't be the veterinarian there? So they just keep it? Okay, go ahead. Wait, here we go, Penny.
I have seen in our own practice that we did have a vet that we probably kept longer than we would have. She was showing some minor improvements, but she was still difficult to deal with. But I think until the right other veterinarian came along, we were just going to keep nursing her along. And it wasn't, you know, in my mind, it wasn't probably the right move, but you have to have income. And if you don't have a veterinarian there, that's a whole full-time veterinarian that's not bringing income into the clinic. And we're a 3-doctor clinic. And so losing one doctor would have impacted the bottom line quite a bit. So I think we are guilty of that.
Well, I think it's such a big issue, right? Because I was looking up, I had my head down a minute ago because I was looking for a quote that came from Eleanor Green at VIS this year. And her quote, when we had posted it on the Bridge Club, so that's why I had to find it. You know, if you can't change the people, change the people. But then I thought, it's an amazing quote, but then I thought, but if you can't change the people and the impact that can have on the culture, the impact that can have on your other employees, if you've got that kind of negative spirit in there where people aren't able to go to the bathroom or they're not able to do the flex time or any of that because there's just not the resources. So it's just a question I was curious about.
Yeah, and you know, we've faced similar issues because you're right that it's a total candidates market out there.
Talking.
So veterinarians are really a lot more than they used to because they have, what is it? It's like 5 full-time workers for every veterinarian.
Yeah.
It's and we struggle to hire. I could hire easily 5 more people and be able to fill their schedules right now. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen. And so what we've done instead is looked at alternative ways to use our paraprofessional staff to take up that slack. And because of that, you know, it has forced us to innovate in that area. But our LVTs in New York and our RVTs in California have been able to, we've been able to utilize their skills out of necessity first because we didn't have a DVM to do it. But now we've realized that actually our reviews after appointments, our RVTs and LVTs get better reviews than our doctors do because they're amazing. And so we've been able to push a lot to them, a lot more to telemedicine, because you better believe you can find a veterinarian who's on maternity leave or wants to work just part-time, and they can take over some of those things that you don't necessarily have to see in the clinic. And I posted a job for a telemedicine position. I had 8 applicants in like 12 hours. And all of them were like, I want this job, I want this job, I want this job. So if we can open our minds to alternative ways to practice medicine in our own hospitals, I think we'll solve a lot of our own problems around that.
And
So can you tell me what a veterinarian that's just doing telemedicine for you, are they, what is that? What are they doing? How are they paid?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have one veterinarian whose full-time job is telemedicine, and then we have a couple others that will do it sort of on a part-time or actually like a flex schedule basis. And so we'll have some veterinarians that are more relief for us that'll come in, they'll do a day of house calls, and say they send out like 10 panels of diagnostics, and then they're gone off to another hospital the next day. We have that veterinarian who is our telemedicine veterinarian that can follow up on those diagnostic panels. They are the ones who can do like, you know, surgical rechecks if needed, although we try to bump those more to our technicians. We have them do basic telemedicine for our members. And so coughing puppies, limping old dogs, you know, red ears, they're able to handle a lot of those non-emergency or non-urgent medical needs. So we try to push anyone who wants to schedule an appointment with us to go through our app and have a consultation with our healthcare team first. Because if we can solve their problem through telemedicine and just say, you know, oh, sorry, your dog's, you know, arthritis flared up, here's some Rimadyl. You know, we've taken care of their problem half the time. They didn't have to get their old dog into the car. We've utilized a veterinarian to their full skills. It's a better experience for everyone all around. And so we pay our telemedicine veterinarians slightly less, but that's also because they're working from home on their couch in their pajamas with a drink by their side. Like, you know, it's easier. There's not walk-ins, there's not emergencies. It's a slightly easier job, in my opinion, than working as a regular vet. But for instance, our telemedicine vet, she worked as a veterinarian in a practice for like.
Okay. Lost you for a moment there, Jess.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So how are, if I could ask, how are they, and I don't want to take us off topic or anything, but they're doing kind of minor exams virtually and dispensing minor medications for things?
So can I suggest, Penny, this is a great question. This is exactly the kind of engagement we really want to get on the
Mhm.
Bridge Club. If it's okay with you, I would suggest maybe we can connect you directly with Jess so you guys can have that kind of a conversation.
Sure.
That way we can focus on the, the associate, the motivation, and the pay part.
Yep, absolutely, that's
And the
fine.
reason I say that is I'm conscious of the fact that we are a little bit past the time that we normally go for a main part of the conversation that we'll get into. And then, which is absolutely okay, just because I think everybody is, this is the way the conversations flow sometimes, right? And I think that's fantastic. Let's keep back to this so that some of the people who are also here today can get their questions answered specific to this topic. And then we'll make sure you guys are connected so you can talk to each other.
Okay, good deal.
Good. Okay. Great. So Jessica, we've kind of dragged you a little bit, off track too, but I know you had a couple of points that you had to make too. You talked a little bit about culture. You talked about the point of asking what people specifically want. So, how do you then, with your team, encourage that value-driven environment that, I think people can say, oh yeah, you're a unique model, you're kind of a startup, but it seems like some of the things that you guys have in terms of that value-driven mentality can be applicable to any kind of practice, even the most traditional.
Absolutely. Can you hear me again now?
Yeah.
If anyone hasn't had the chance to read it yet, there's a book by Dan Pink that's called Drive. And it's, I think the subtitle is like the unusual things that motivate people or something like that. But basically, it goes into talk about what truly motivates people. And there's three main things, and that is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, and that you are giving people who are most affected by a problem the chance to solve that problem on their own without having to get permission from somebody else to solve the problem. Mastery, and that they can see themselves improving at something every day. It's that personal growth. And then purpose, what are they working toward? Do they have a mission or a vision or some end goal that they can achieve? And so I'll use, for an example, a lovely veterinary assistant that we have. I just saw a chat. What's the name of the book? It's Drive by Dan Pink. And so I had this lovely veterinary assistant that was just struggling. She rated her job, but when it came to actual happiness, she was having a hard time. And so she came to me the other day and said, like, look, I went to somebody's house call and they weren't home. I knocked on the door. Nobody was there. I stood there for 20 minutes. I asked our customer, experienced people if I could leave. Nobody got back to me. Like, what's the deal? I said, well, how would you like to handle the situation? Like, you don't have to ask permission to leave somebody's house if they're not home and not showing up for their appointment. So why don't you write a protocol of the steps that you need to take to make sure that, you've covered your bases, and then you can leave and you don't have to ask anyone permission. That was like 2 days ago. And since then, she's probably written me 12 protocols about how to handle all of the little problems in her day, because I gave her the autonomy to be the master of her own universe and solve her own problems. And as long as she can document what steps she needs to take and make sure that those steps are not affecting other people negatively, then great. She now has the autonomy. She has mastered a new skill in creating protocols. She has this purpose of improving her life as well as the company as a whole. And I could see in the last 2 days just this total switch in her attitude, because I there's something to work toward and a new skill and some autonomy over her own life. So we try to live that every single day with all of our employees.
That's awesome. So we are at 7:41 now, Central Standard Time.
Yep.
I don't know what 41 it is in the time zone you're in, but something 41. So we're kind of officially at that point now where we are at what we call our after party. which means that there are a few other questions. You know, we're going to ask Jess real quickly here to kind of wrap up if she has a closing statement she would like to make. And then we'll open it up to some further conversation for those of you who'd like to hang around for a few minutes more. So Jess, how would you like to tie this all up in a nice little bow before we have a free-for-all?
Boy, I don't think there's any way to tie it up because we could talk about culture for the next 12 hours and still not get to all of the parts that need to be spoken about. But basically, I think the biggest thing about culture is understanding what motivates your employees by actually asking them what motivates them and not just assuming that you know everything about them, and understanding that the people that work for us are human beings that need to eat, drink, pee, and be with their families. So, you know, those are the basic needs of humanity to keep even like okay staff members. And then if we can find what really motivates them, we'll be able to keep and hire the really, really great staff members. So that's probably about it. And then, you know, kind of with our tangent earlier, if anyone ever does want to talk telemedicine, I could tangent about that for hours and hours and hours. So that's a different conversation entirely. But thank you for having me.
We've loved it. This is such an important topic, you know, as Catherine and I were talking with all of you, you know, at the front, who doesn't want to have happier employees and employees that are actually contributing instead of sitting around griping all the time. So, you know, the thing when Jess and I were talking about, you know, how do we narrow this conversation into something that can take just a few minutes, so many aspects to it. But the thing that really was most profound to me is ask them what's important to them. Don't make those assumptions that what's important to you is important to them. And then, you know, do the best we can to deliver on what's important to each of them as well. And I'm like, wow, that's just so simple. Could that possibly be the answer to?
So I would add on top of that the why, because, you know, here just wanted a sign turned around because it was causing stress for the cats. But someone may go, she's just being a pickle. She wants the sign. She hates the sign. So I think sometimes some of the strangest requests, I'm not saying that was a strange request by any means, but some of the strangest things can be that trigger that would really cause someone to leave because you don't really understand the real why behind it. Is, you know, is it causing them stress in another way? Is it uncomfortable for them? Is it because, you know, they aren't able to use the facilities? Whatever it might be, I think it's really important also not only take that feedback, but then ask and have a conversation as to why, because it could be really insightful that there could be another cause as well.
And I think sometimes people need to know what the big picture is. You can't just tell somebody, no, we can't do this. I think if there's a logical reason, then it needs to be explained. I think that helps. And then you have to open yourself up to really, is that technically a really good reason, or should we be looking at this idea as an option? So I think valuing what people say and not just giving them a closed answer is important.
That's valid. That's very valid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering whether Jessica's found. I mean, I love it. I actually am going to introduce myself on social media because I've got so much to talk to her about. But the one thing that's striking me is, I wonder whether Jessica feels that this is it's a paradigm shift in the way hospitals work and the priorities of the management, which I think is fantastic. This is the wave of the future without a doubt. I'm kind of wondering though, whether in her experience, she's been able to get through to some of the stodgy, more traditional ways. I mean, are they seeing the value in this? Or is it something that those dinosaurs are just going to die out and the new ones are going to take over this way?
It's a good question.
That's such a good question. I do think that this is mostly a paradigm shift. I think it's generational a lot because I'm a millennial. You know, we are mission-driven people. We grew up seeing our parents work 70 hours a week and, you know, have that beautiful house in the suburb with a white picket fence and 2.5 kids, and they were miserable. And so we've seen that, you know, number of hours and amount of pay and material things don't make you happy. And so this generation of myself and younger are seeing that we have to find those other things that make us happy. And it's not money and it's not objects. And so certainly that is a paradigm shift. Now, for those old dinosaurs that are out there, some of them get it, some of them don't. Some of them will just have to die out. You know, so for instance, I'm going to jump slightly back to the telemedicine bit here, but I went to it was the AVMA Veterinary Leadership Convention, and I sat myself down at a table. This is kind of like one of my secret things that I love to do, is I find tables of people with all white hair, and I stick myself in the middle of their table. And I say like, oh, I'm this farm kid from Illinois, you know, I'm a veterinarian. I grew up in a veterinary hospital. I wanted to be a cattle vet, and I get to know them. And then once everyone's comfortable, I go, okay, we're going to talk about telemedicine now and how you can institute it into your own practice. And it's just one of my favorite things to do, because some of them, you can just see them like, you know, and I've had a couple people just get up and leave and go to other tables because they didn't want any part of it. But others have been incredibly receptive, and at the end of our conversations have said, like, I really appreciate you having this conversation because you changed my mind about it, and I understand it. And so there is a group of the older folks that understand that that paradigm shift is happening, whether they want it to or not. And there is a group of them that are just going to go out kicking and screaming, and there's nothing that we can do about it.
Do you find that it's different between an older person who owns a clinic and an older veterinarian who works for someone who owns a clinic?
You know, I don't think I've had enough experience with those two subgroups to understand that one. But every experience that I've had with an older person in a position of authority, meaning someone who is an AVMA delegate or a practice owner, those have been more difficult conversations, because things like power and authority makes them believe that their position is more correct.
Wow.
It's gotten them to that point, so why shouldn't it be? But obviously that's not going to work forever.
Mm.
So we're at 7:49. One more question or comment, and then I think we should probably ask Jess to give us our closing toast, and we'll send everybody off to their evenings. But you know, before we do, I think Catherine and I want to say thank you to all of you who have taken time this evening to join us on the Bridge Club. If you like what you hear, we hope you consider becoming an all-access member if you haven't already, and that's what gives you access to the videos of all these conversations that we have. So.
And we have a lot of telemedicine you can look up.
Yay!
60 conversations over the past 18 months, so there's something for everybody out there.
For everybody.
Anyway, so anybody have one last question that you would like to ask Jess?
I just wanted to say one thing about, I think so much of what Jess is talking about, I see as I go to different practices and talking to relief veterinarians, and the reasons that they do, the things that drive them into relief, and the two biggest things are culture and flexibility. And I think what's going to happen is, I think as innovative companies like Fuzzy start and other forward-thinking practices start creating cultures that fit this group of people, they won't be relief vets, at least not all of them. Because I do think sometimes people who are driven to relief may be driven to relief for the wrong reason. Because I think relief is its own special thing. It's its own unique niche, and I don't think everyone who wants flexibility and a better culture is going to be a good relief vet. They might not really want to be a relief vet. They might want to go work for a place like Fuzzy. They just can't find it. And so I think it's all going to shake out. I think there's this like mass wave of people going to relief. There's all these clinics that are losing potential associates, but it's going to shake out as these clinics get better cultures. And then you're going to have the true relief vets who really want to be business-to-business service providers. And then you're going to have good places for these other vets to go.
Absolutely.
That's a great comment, Cindy. Thank you for that.
And to touch on that, one of the things that I've heard from relief vets is the reason they love relief is because they love to help their colleagues. They want that doctor to have a vacation, right? Or, you know, to be able to pop in if somebody gets sick. And I admire that so much. There are veterinarians out there, like they just want to exist just so they can help their colleagues have a better life. And I think that's incredible. A lot of the veterinarians that we do have work for us are what you're talking about though, Cindy, in that they don't necessarily want to be relief. They just haven't found a clinic that's the fit for them. And they actually do want to have full-time work. They just don't want to commit to a practice without knowing what that practice's culture is like in a sort of longer term setting. And so often they'll come and work for us a day or two a week until they're like, okay, this is the right place for me. And then they'll come on a part-time or full-time employee sort of basis.
Great comments. Great comments. All right, Jess, you're up for a closing toast now.
Yeah, so I guess
Pass is up.
Penny's like, again, didn't know I was supposed to have a beverage.
I'll use mine.
Beverages are part of it all.
You will not make that mistake again.
Think twice. Yeah.
So I guess closing toast is just one, thank you for having me. I'm honored that you guys would consider me even to have a conversation like this, and I hope we consider or continue to keep having these conversations because it is so critical to our profession right now. So I will actually toast to autonomy, mastery, and purpose because I believe that those really are the keys to having the happiest employees.
All right. Cheers, everybody. That's fantastic.